In 1991, a UFO sighting during a solar eclipse captivated Mexico City with multiple videos of a mysterious disc-shaped object. And in 2015, a strange beetle-like thing caught on camera left more questions than answers. Here's my question: why is Mexico such a hotbed for UFO sightings? These are unexplained signs of alien life scientists discovered in Mexico. In 2023, something wild went down in Mexico's Congress. A well-known journalist and UFO enthusiast, a man you'll be hearing a lot about in this video, Jaime Maussan, showed up with what looked like two tiny alien bodies in glass cases. He claimed these mummified little guys were over 1,000 years old and not human. They had big heads, only 3 fingers per hand, and looked like they were pulled straight out of an ancient alien episode. According to Maussan, they were found near the Nazca lines in Peru. Naturally, people freaked out. But scientists and experts started asking questions almost immediately. The National Autonomous University of Mexico stepped in and basically said, well, we carbon dated these things, we're not saying they're aliens, and that's where things got messy. Critics argued that the mummies might just be old human remains that were manipulated to look alien, like stitched together bones from different things. So far, no conclusive proof that they're legit aliens, but this is far from the only alien-related news to come out of Mexico. In July of 1991, Mexico City was home to one of the most talked about UFO sightings in Latin America. During a solar eclipse, people across the city were filming the sky, but some of these recordings showed more than just the moon passing in front of the sun. On several tapes, there was what looked like a metallic disc-shaped object hovering in the air. The footage that got the most attention came from a man named Guillermo Aragon, a television executive. He handed it over to journalist Jaime Maussan, who helped push it into the public spotlight. Once it aired, the response was immediate. Tons of people contacted the station saying they'd seen the same thing, and more videos started pouring in. Many showing a very similar object in the same part of the sky. The fact that there were multiple angles made it harder to write off as, a lens flare or a camera glitch. Even decades later, it's still considered one of the strongest mass witnessed UFO cases in history. This next one's more recent and a little more subtle, but still strange. In 2015, a video surfaced online showing what looks like an object floating motionless above Mexico City. It doesn't zip around or flash lights, it just sort of hangs there. What immediately sticks out about this thing, though, is the shape. It's been described as beetle-like. Not quite saucer-shaped, not a balloon either, definitely not the usual aircraft silhouette. The video was picked up by Scott Waring, a UFO blogger and self-proclaimed researcher who's known for analyzing sightings from around the world. He posted it on his YouTube channel and said the shape and movement, or lack thereof, caught his attention. Of course, drones were already pretty common by 2015, so some viewers said that's probably what it was, but there is something about how it floats. It's kind of heavy looking, but still, makes it hard to explain away so easily. Before the so-called alien mummies were wheeled into Mexico's Congress in 2023, they'd also made headlines 6 years earlier. In 2017, Jaime Maussan and a team of researchers presented similar-looking mummified bodies found near Peru's Nazca lines. These specimens had the same elongated skulls, 3 fingers on each hand, and a skeletal structure that didn't quite match up with any known human remains, or so the claim went. Now, at first glance, it was the kind of thing that grabs attention. Strange-looking figures, supposedly ancient, and of course associated with the mystery of the Nazca lines, an area already tied to all kinds of ancient alien theories. The bodies looked eerily alien, but the deeper you dug into it, the messier things got. A number of scientists and archaeologists again quickly raised red flags. They called it out as a hoax, saying these so-called aliens were likely made by combining real human bones with animal parts and synthetic material. In short, some people might have built them. It got so serious that the World Congress on Mummy Studies called this a crime on cultural heritage. They were not playing around. It wasn't just about whether aliens were real, it was about disturbing and possibly destroying ancient human remains for the sake of making a viral story. Still, there are people who believe that these were really aliens, that there was some kind of cover-up going on, which continues to go on. apparently. What do you all think though? This next clip was uploaded to YouTube by Joey Nolan. Take a look. A strange piece of footage indeed. Some sort of semi-translucent shape seems to be moving around at the top of the stairs. According to the uploader, the footage was captured on his home security camera on August 8th, 2019 at 12:54 a.m. Whatever it is, it seems to change shape throughout. At first, it almost looks like a small human figure walking out from the shadows of the kitchen before stopping at the top of the stairs. Then it almost looks like two floating orbs. Once again, I turn to you though. What do you all think of this one? A hoax, a piece of dust, or does it just look too uncanny to be faked? You know what always creeps me out? Chairs moving on their own. Luckily, I've never seen this happen in person myself, but the idea of it has always gotten under my skin. It's a horror trope that just always works. Reddit user the Dotty Dot posted this piece of footage taken at an elementary school after closing. Take a look at this. Now, on its own, the video ain't much. I mean, something like this could have easily been faked, but there is a story to go along with it as well. The Dotty Dot wrote, "My mom has worked for the school system for 28 years. The elementary school she worked at is said to be haunted, but she never mentioned seeing anything. She retired this year, but obviously she's still friends with all the staff. One of her close friends works there as a custodian and was cleaning up after hours and she heard a noise. She went into this room to check it out and saw this chair doing this. It kept going, so she started recording it. I have no idea how long it went on. My mom sent it to me." A Reddit user by the name of ADRN916 posted this eerie image here with the caption, "Trail cam photo captured after lake was dug. Ghost hunter type team called them tree people." It's definitely an odd image. It almost looks like two ghostly figures emanating from a pair of trees or like partially fused with them, hence the name tree people. Also kind of looks like two people floating in midair. Now, background info on this is pretty scarce, but the uploader did post this image as well. Now we see two figures, possibly the same ones in the first image, running past the camera. The low quality could explain their kind of ghostly look, but there's still something eerie about the image. And according to the uploader, the property, which they don't own, the image comes from a friend of theirs, is pretty secluded. So even if these figures aren't paranormal, it's strange for people to just be roaming around the area. Apparently the property owner and his family have also reported hearing strange, inhuman screams at night. Take a look at this image of an abandoned asylum in Wales. Notice anything odd? Take a look at the top window in the middle. Here's a even closer look. Just what the hell is that? Well, the man who snapped the picture, Adam Smith, said he was walking past the abandoned Brecon and Radnor Lunatic Asylum when he spotted something glaring down at him from one of the second floor windows. In 2016, when the photo was taken, the asylum had been abandoned for over 15 years. So what was this thing? A squatter or something else? Interestingly, the asylum had also been used as a prisoner of war camp during World War II. An abandoned asylum and former prisoner of war camp definitely sets the stage for a haunting or two, making this ghoulish face seem a lot more unsettling. Reddit user Pink Cuppa posted this eerie family photo, writing, "This one's from my family. I don't really believe in ghosts, but this one gets me. The apparition, faintly visible over the deceased grandma, is a husband of the dead wife. The husband had already been dead for 5+ years. This photo was taken in central Poland roughly 20 years ago. My girlfriend is telling me this is just a trick of an old camera, but I highly doubt it. The apparition was already dead for at least 5 years. There are multiple pictures, some of which have been burned in horror of the apparition." It's a freaky image for sure, but a lot of commenters think this is a case of double exposure, and while that's most likely the case, it doesn't really take away from the creepiness to me. I mean, double exposure or not, the deceased husband still showed up in a photograph of his widowed wife's dead body. That's just weird. Was this just a coincidence, or had the husband's spirit somehow influenced the events that led up to a particularly freaky double exposure? Reddit user Kara Forever 2084 had been helping a friend move when this video was captured on his ring cam. According to the uploader, the shadowy figure doesn't look like anyone who was there. He writes, "In December of 2020, my wife and I were helping a friend unload stuff from his truck into the house. As we wound down, we were catching up and joking around. My friend's phone went off. He checked it, and it was a notification from his ring cam, which was mounted on the middle of the window of the front door. It said there was a motion detected, and it sent him this vid. We were the only people there, and we were just outside the door. None of us saw anything with the naked eye. TikToker LGAP posted a video with the caption, "Help me, there is something in my house." And based on this footage, I'd be inclined to believe him. Take a look. Yeah, this is one of my worst nightmares. Hearing a noise in the middle of the night, walking into the living room, only to spot a dark shape in the corner, of course, hoping it's just your eyes playing tricks on you. I mean, surely there's not really someone there. As soon as I flick on the lights, I'll find out it's just a coat I left there earlier, something like that. But then you flick on the light and whatever the thing was just vanishes. I can't decide if a shadowy figure disappearing is worse than something still standing there when the lights come on. At least if it was still there, I wouldn't feel like I was losing my mind. Only way things could possibly get worse though is if you plucked up the courage to flick the lights off again and the mysterious shadowy entity was standing exactly where it was before, which is exactly what happens in the video. Next up, we have a video from a now deleted Reddit user who spotted something peeking out at him while filming in an abandoned hospital ward somewhere in California. This is what he saw. Take a look. According to the original uploader who did maintenance work at the hospital, a security guard had told him that he'd kept seeing things while patrolling the ward at night and wanted someone else to see because he thought he was losing his mind. The guard suggested the Redditor film to see if he could pick anything up, and the uploader agreed. He didn't realize what his camera had picked up until he got home later and watched the footage back. When he saw it, his heart dropped, describing the realization of what he'd captured as the creepiest thing he'd ever seen. Now, people have commented saying that the figure, it just seems too dark. The hallway is bright enough that you'd think it would cast enough light on the figure to make out some features, but instead it appears as this featureless black mass. A creepy video for sure, and not the last hospital entity we have on the list. Just what did this man happen to spot in an abandoned hospital in Honduras? That does not look human. It almost looks like the ghost of E.T. or something to me, doesn't it? It doesn't even look like a human figure. Whatever it is though, it's creepy. There's an interesting backstory here as well. Supposedly strange things have been known to go on at this hospital. Lights will turn on and off patients' rooms, and people will hear unexplained things at night. And why? Well, some believe that the hospital is haunted by the spirit of a doctor who took their own life at the hospital. Could this strange figure be the ghost of this doctor, or is this one just a hoax? Up next, we have yet another hospital entity. Take a look at the doors behind the doctor here. So that is not a trick of the camera or the light. Someone or something very clearly passes by the door. Now, your first thought is probably, well, yeah, it's just a person, but watch what happens next. The cameraman is clearly shocked by what he's just seen. There's probably not meant to be anyone in that room, so he walks in to investigate, and what does he see? Nothing. It's an empty room, aside from the equipment anyway, and there doesn't appear to be any other exit. What we do see is a piece of equipment rolling as if someone has just bumped it as they walked by. Now, there are a few things I really like about this video. First of all, it's 16 years old, so it has that low quality video spook factor to it. Not too thrilled about 2008 being 16 years ago. That's kind of scarier than the video itself, but anyway. Commenters have also pointed out how unnatural this mysterious figure is. Not just because of how dark it is, but look at how it moves. It almost looks like it glides past the door rather than walking. It doesn't have like the bounce you have with normal steps. On top of that, it seems to glide by at a pretty good speed. What are your thoughts on this one? Let me know down below. From Reddit user FarAd8219 comes a story about a terrifying encounter they had while scuba diving. It goes as follows. A couple years ago, a buddy of mine rented a boat out for my birthday to go out in the sea with. We started to go out off the coast of the Cape, and the water was a bit chilly. We were maybe 22 miles out from the coast while still having sight of the shore. Before I got in the water, a weird chill came down my spine. I brushed it off and put my tank on my back, followed by my goggles, and got into the water. And then I saw a pair of glistening eyes in the ocean. I thought it was a shark, I've had my fair share of training for 6 years with sharks and other deep ocean water creatures, so I thought I'd be able to handle it. It slowly started making its way toward me, and I got a better glimpse at it. It was huge. Sharks have a smooth, rubbery type of flesh. This creature had scales like a snake. This was not a shark. Red was pouring out of its mouth. It looked like it was ready for its next meal. Its teeth were poking out the side of its jaw, and it even had hard, razor-sharp fins. I attempted to hurry away, but I was in shock. I thought I would die from shock or from this thing eating me. I finally cut out of shock the moment it started to swim more swiftly, but my monofin could only go so fast in the water. My buddy was getting a little suspicious. He looked over the boat deck and he saw me attempting to swim for my life as this dark shadow was inching closer. I eventually reached the boat, and out of breath, I told him to book it. We ended up not using the boat for the rest of the day and went home. To this day, I have no idea what that thing was, but in all my years of experience, I just don't want to find out. On November 11, 2018, seismographs around the world picked up this bizarre signal coming from the Indian Ocean near the island of Mayat. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen. Low-frequency waves that lasted over 20 minutes and looked almost artificial. Even weirder though, nobody actually felt a thing. Normally earthquakes create these sharp jolts of movement, but this signal had no typical P waves or F waves, the kind that would make the ground shake. It was just there. At first, no one had a clue what had caused it. Was it some unknown geological event, a secret military test, something else entirely? Months of investigation finally led to an answer. A massive, new undersea volcano had formed on the ocean floor, one of the largest discovered in modern times. It was quietly erupting 2.5 miles below the surface, producing these strange waves as it reshaped the seafloor. And here's something kinda unsettling. Scientists had no idea a volcano that big was forming until they saw the seismic data. How many other massive geological changes could be happening under the ocean completely undetected? For decades, submarines and research vessels in the Southern Ocean kept picking up something strange on their sonar, an odd repeating noise that sounded vaguely like a duck quacking. It was so consistent that researchers nicknamed it the bioduck, but no one could figure out what was making the sound or why it happened seasonally, mostly during Antarctic winters. Take a listen. First, people thought it could be some unknown marine creature or a kind of classified military technology. Since the sound was often detected near ice shelves, some even thought shifting icebergs might be causing it. It wasn't until 2014 that scientists finally figured it out though. Turns out the bioduck is made by Antarctic minke whales, but even though we know who is making the sound, one question still remains. Why do they do it? Minke whales are notoriously hard to study, spending most of their time in remote, icy waters, so no one is sure if this noise is for communication, navigation, or something else entirely. The Dragon's Triangle, or the Devil's Sea, found off the coast of Japan. It's been notorious for centuries, with reports of ships and planes vanishing without a trace, strange lights in the sky and water, and bizarre electronic failures. Even the Japanese government officially recognizes it as a danger zone. One of the most infamous disappearances happened in 1952, when a research vessel called the Kaiomaru No. 5 was sent to study the area. It had a crew of 31 people, and none of them returned, and there was no wreckage either. So what happened? Well, given that reports of weird sightings here go back to ancient times, long before modern technology, some people wonder if something out of the ordinary happened. Some witnesses claim to have seen objects darting in and out of the water at impossible speeds in this area. Most seas on Earth are bordered by land, but the Sargasso Sea is completely different. Sitting in the middle of the North Atlantic, it's surrounded by ocean currents rather than coastlines, making it feel like a giant watery vortex. But the strange part is, despite those powerful surrounding currents, the sea itself is eerily calm. It's also filled with seaweed, which floats in massive mats across the surface, giving the whole area this haunting, lifeless appearance. Sailors have feared the Sargasso Sea for centuries, with legends of ships getting trapped in its still waters, never to return, and That's not just old superstition. Historical records show that abandoned ships have been found adrift in this area intact, but with no crew on board. Then there's the European eel mystery. These eels somehow know to migrate from European rivers all the way to the Sargasso Sea to spawn, despite never having been there before. No one fully understands why this specific patch of sea is the only place they breed. Scientists have theories involving something to do with Earth's magnetic field, but they don't really know for sure. It's just like something is pulling them there. For centuries, sailors have reported sailing through massive stretches of the ocean that glow with this eerie, milky white light. And these aren't just tiny patches of bioluminescence from plankton. These glowing waters sometimes cover thousands of square miles, visible even from space. The phenomenon known as a Milky Sea is so rare that most people assumed that it was just another sailor's tall tale. That is until 2006, when a group of scientists finally captured satellite images proving that it was real. The leading theory is that bioluminescent bacteria are responsible, somehow coordinating on a massive scale, maintaining a steady glow for hours or even days at a time. Researchers think it might have something to do with attracting fish that eat them, but the exact reason and how such vast numbers of bacteria synchronize like this, it's still a bit of a mystery. The only thing we know for sure is that if you ever sail into one, you won't need a flashlight to see what's swimming beneath your boat. In July of 1965, Captain Marvin McCamus and Captain Bill Rainey, both Navy officers, were aboard the deep-sea submersible Alvin, conducting a routine check on the Artemis listening array in the Bahamas, tongue of the ocean. They were already about 1,500 meters, about 5,000 feet underwater, when they descended another 300 feet to follow a cable that spanned a crevice. While McCamus was focusing on the cable, he noticed something unusual moving around them. At first he thought the sub was drifting along the cable, but then he realized that the object was moving on its own. McCamus would later describe what he saw, saying, "I was astonished to see a thick body with flippers, a long neck, a snake-like head with two eyes looking right at us. It looked like a big lizard with flippers and had two sets of them." He went on to describe watching as the creature swam upwards, but before they could get the cameras in position, the animal disappeared from their view. Completely shaken, they returned to the surface, but when they reported the sighting, they were understandably met with criticism. McCamus logged the event in the wet log, but he believed the Navy deleted it before it made it to the final log. McCamus, with over 300 dives under his belt, was adamant that he had never seen anything like this before. The creature McCamus described seemed eerily similar to a plesiosaur, an extinct sea creature that the Loch Ness Monster is often described looking like. Rogue waves are one of the ocean's most terrifying mysteries, and they seem to just appear out of nowhere. These massive walls of water can be twice the size of any wave around them, sometimes reaching over 100 feet tall. And unlike tsunamis, which we can usually trace back to earthquakes, rogue waves just show up unexpectedly, making them even more unsettling. For a long time, scientists weren't even sure if they were real or just myths invented to explain these sudden disappearances of ships. But in 1995, one of these waves was actually recorded for the first time, and suddenly rogue waves went from folklore to reality. Now researchers are trying to figure out exactly what causes them and how they get so huge. What's wild is that no one really knows how these waves can grow to such extreme heights. As Ton van den Bremer, a fluid mechanics expert, points out, studying rogue waves isn't just about figuring out why these waves are so freakishly big, it could also teach us more about the physics behind all types of waves in the ocean. In the late summer of 1817, the coast of Massachusetts was suddenly visited by a very strange creature. Fishermen off the coast, and at first they thought it might just be a prank, but as more and more people saw it, the creature started to gain traction. It was described as a huge serpentine creature, its head and body rising about 8 feet out of the water, with a head as large as a horse's. The body itself was about 3 feet in diameter and stretched an estimated 50 feet long. Oddly, it didn't sliver through the water. People described it moving vertically, almost like a whale or dolphin breaching the surface. At first, people thought it was probably just a hoax, but when the creature swam closer to land, things started to feel a lot less like fiction. More and more witnesses started reporting sightings. Oh my god, there's a sea monster that keeps showing up. Well, I think it's a hoax. No, I saw it. It's definitely real. Well, during this frenzied wave of sightings, one person, eager to prove the creature was real, fired at it with a musket. Fortunately, muskets weren't really known for being the most reliable weapons, and it didn't hit. Today, some people look back on this incident and dismiss the sightings as nothing more than mass hysteria. One theory is also that the serpent might have been a group of narwhals, which from a distance could have looked like a single massive creature, but it's also entirely possible that there really was some sort of strange creature lurking up the coast, forever scared away by the blast of an unreliable 19th century firearm. The ocean's twilight zone is still one of the most mysterious and unexplored parts of the ocean. It may not be the deepest part of the ocean, but it is home to an astonishing amount of life. In 2014, scientists released a study which talked about how there might be 10 times more fish living in the twilight zone than previously thought. To put that into perspective, it could mean there are more fish in this one part of the ocean than in the entire rest of the sea. Of course, these numbers are estimates, but one thing's for sure, there are a lot of fish down there. What's even more mind-blowing is the migration that happens every single night. Fish and other creatures from the twilight zone rise to the surface of the ocean to feed before sinking back down into the depths. It's been called the greatest migration on Earth, and it's been happening for millions of years, though it wasn't really understood until the 1940s. That's when researchers working with sonar equipment originally to detect submarines kept picking up an unexpected false bottom. And what do I mean by a false bottom? Well, instead of just reflecting off the ocean floor, their sonar was detecting what almost seemed like a bottom, but it was just way too high up in the water. Well, what they were hearing was a massive layer of life in the twilight zone, all rising and falling with the rhythms of the ocean. Simon Thorold, an ecologist studying this phenomena, compares the motion to the ocean breathing, like a quote giant diaphragm, driving the very breath that the world is taking every day, end quote. But with all the life that exists deep down in this mostly unexplored part of the ocean, how many undiscovered creatures could be swimming around down there? Probably quite a lot. The Honey Island Swamp Monster, also called the Cajun Sasquatch, is a creature said to live in the Honey Island Swamp in Louisiana. Descriptions of it are pretty similar to Bigfoot, a large, hairy, bipedal creature, about, again, 7 feet tall. I don't know what it is with all these 7 feet tall monsters. This one, though, with gray hair and glowing yellow or red eyes, and a horrible smell. People who've claimed to see it say it looks like an ape-human hybrid, and the creature is even sometimes called the Louisiana Wookiee, or just the Thing. Some people have reported finding unusual footprints, with only 4 toes instead of the usual 5, which is pretty strange for a primate. The first reported sighting happened in 1963. Harlan Ford, a retired air traffic controller turned wildlife photographer, had taken footage of this strange creature with a Super 8 camera. The footage was only found after his death, in 1980 though, when a reel of film showing the creature was found among his belongings. But even back in 1974, Ford and his friend Billy Mills said they had found strange footprints and the body of a wild boar with its throat slashed in the swamp. Today, people still believe the creature roams the swamp. Some people believe the creature, or creatures, may be escaped circus chimpanzees from a train crash that happened in the early 20th century, and then the story goes they might have just ran out into the woods and eventually adapted to their new environment. Now, we've covered a lot of big, hairy monsters, so let's change things up for a moment with something very different. I don't know what to make of this one. Is it a ghost, a demonic spirit? Not sure, but the story comes from Reddit user Mr. Witch, who writes, I was hiking through the remnants of a remote, long-abandoned town in the surrounding area. To get as far into the woods as I was, you had to cross fallen trees over a creek 3 times. I had just crossed the 3rd bridge and was about 5 miles in when something blue caught my eye just ahead of me. There was a man in his 60s at least, wearing blue satin pajamas, sitting in a tree. The closer I got to him, the louder he laughed. It wasn't a maniacal laugh, but it set off all the alarms in my head nevertheless. He also wasn't wearing any shoes, but looked well-groomed and clean. I gave him a friendly nod as I passed, and he just kept laughing. Then it stopped. I turned, and he was gone. There was no branch cracking, plants rustling, nothing. He was just gone. Still rubs me the wrong way. The area I was in was pretty rough, like very secluded. Not very many people venture as deep as I was that day. No idea what was going on there. In May of 1882, two boys, Ed and Joe, were fishing in a creek near Crosswick, Ohio, when they encountered something that would go down in history as one of Ohio's strangest stories, and that is saying a lot for Ohio. Ed and Joe heard rustling in the bush and started to see what they'd later describe as a massive-sized snake. The creature then charged at them, and when it got close to Ed, it suddenly grew arms and legs. Two arms shot out, and two legs appeared from some hidden spot on its body. It grabbed Ed and started dragging him toward a hollow tree. The two friends, of course, screamed in terror, and three men working in a nearby quarry ran to help. By the time they got there, the creature was trying to crawl into the tree with Ed still in its grip. The men shouted, scaring the creature off, and Ed was rescued. Though he was physically okay and expected to recover soon, he did have strange convulsions and bouts of terror afterward. Now, that very same day, a group of 60 men armed with pitchforks and axes gathered around said tree. When they started chopping, the creature leaped out and ran upright like a person off into the forest. It was described as this 30 to 40 feet long creature, 12 to 14 feet tall, and it sped away and vanished. No one ever saw the creature again, but it became known as the Crosswick Monster. In 1952, the small town of Flatwoods, West Virginia, became the site of one of the strangest cryptid encounters in history. It all started when a group of youngsters and their teacher were playing baseball when they saw a mysterious light in the sky, which crashed into the nearby woods. Curious, they went to investigate, and they saw something they couldn't make sense of. A 10-foot tall creature with a glowing red face, a spade-shaped head, and a body wrapped in this metallic-looking fabric. It was also hovering in place. It began slowly moving toward the group, who quickly dashed back out of the forest and into town to report the incident. There were multiple investigations, but no concrete evidence was found to explain the encounter. In 1973, deep in the forests of Tennessee, a group of hunters reported an unusual encounter with a creature they could only describe as a wild man. The group was out hunting when they came across a large, hairy figure standing between the trees, staring at them with glowing eyes. The creature was roughly 7 feet tall, with thick, matted fur covering its body. The hunters described it as having a pungent, musky odor similar to a wet dog. Yum. One of the hunters fired a shot at the creature, but it disappeared into the woods before anyone could get a good look at it. The group found no tracks or evidence of the creature afterward either. This sighting would become part of a larger collection of, quote, wild man sightings in the Appalachian region. And ever since, there have been theories that there could be some reclusive, undiscovered species living deep out in the woods. This last story just chilled me to the bone. I'll call it the Watcher in the Woods. It comes from Reddit user Jamie11134 and goes as follows. I live right next to the woods. I can see them out my window. Well, one night I was sitting on my bed watching TV when a light flashed through my window. I looked around and there was nothing there, so I brushed it off as me being crazy. About 5 minutes later, it happened again, so I looked around again, but there was still nothing. The third time it happened, I was getting ticked off, and I assumed it was one of my stupid neighbor's kids who always mess around. I opened my window to tell them to piss off, but as I looked closer, the only thing I saw was a black purse, one that I had lost about a week before when I went clubbing. Something in my head was screaming to get away from the window, so I shut it and closed the curtains, locked my bedroom door before calling my dad. He came over immediately and grabbed the bag from outside, then locked all the windows and doors before checking the whole house. We looked through the purse and nothing had been taken, but there was also a small note crumpled in it that said something along the lines of, watch your back. My dad called the cops, who also did a full sweep of the house and took the purse back with them. The next morning, they found a flashlight and a backpack, which had a small collection of pictures of me that had been taken over what looked to be the course of a year. The Fouke monster, aka the Boggy Creek monster, is probably most famous for the cult 1972 docu-horror movie The Legend of Boggy Creek. But stories about this creature stalking the forests around Fouke, Arkansas actually go back to 1851. But in 1971, this creature that had only been whispered about by locals suddenly made headlines when a disturbing report came from a couple named Bobby and Elizabeth Ford. Elizabeth had been sleeping on the couch and thought a bear was reaching through her window. Well, it turns out it was not a bear, but a large ape-like creature. Her husband and brother-in-law chased it off, firing shots at it, but they couldn't take it down. Later, they found 3-toed footprints near the house and scratches on the porch. A few weeks later, 3 people reported seeing the same creature cross a highway, and other locals and visitors started reporting strange sightings too. Over the years, more tracks were found and people kept spotting the creature. In 1991, someone claimed to see it jump from a bridge. By 1997, there were 40 reported sightings, and in 1998, it was supposedly seen near a creek bed. The Fouke monster is still a big part of local legend, with sightings continuing from time to time. Stories about a lizard man stalking Lee County, South Carolina date back to 1988. It all kicked off when local sheriffs were called to check out a vehicle that had been damaged outside a house near a swamp. The car had huge tooth marks and scratches all over it. Once the story hit the news, a teenager named Christopher Davis came forward with his own experience. He said that 2 weeks prior, his car had also been messed up, but this time he had actually seen what did it. He described the creature as this massive 7-foot-tall lizard-like thing with 3 fingers on each hand, red eyes, and green, wet, scaly skin. Christopher was driving home from work one night when he got a flat tire. As he was fixing it, he saw the creature coming toward him. Freaked out, he jumped into his car and tried to drive off, but the lizard man was fast and it actually chased him down, running at 40 miles per hour, and even jumped onto the roof of his car, scratching at it. Christopher slammed on the brakes, sending the creature flying off, and then he sped away. Once Christopher's story hit the papers, the whole town just went crazy. People were reporting more sightings, and the local radio station even offered a $1 million reward to anyone who could catch the lizard man. But by the end of that summer, reports started to fade out, and local sheriffs started saying it was probably just a bear, because, of course, bears and scaly, red-eyed lizard monsters look exactly the same, right? The Enfield monster case started in April of 1973, when a strange creature was reported in Enfield, Illinois. The first sighting happened one night when a man named Henry McDaniel heard scratching at his door. Thinking it was a bear, he grabbed a firearm and flashlight and cautiously made his way to the front door. But when he opened it, he saw something. It just wasn't a bear. He described the creature as being about 4.5 feet tall, with 3 legs, short arms, and big pink glowing eyes. It was grayish and hairless. McDaniel fired at the thing, hitting it, and the creature made a sound like a wildcat before hopping away, covering 50 feet in just 3 jumps. When McDaniel called the police, they found strange footprints near the house, which were dog-like but apparently had 6 toes. McDaniel's screen door had also these large scratches taken out of it. A couple weeks later, McDaniel reported seeing the creature again near railroad tracks. A search party later reported coming across an ape-like creature near an abandoned building. More strange sightings started pouring in, and some started to wonder if the creature was some escaped animal from the zoo, like a kangaroo or an ape. McDaniel, who'd once had a kangaroo as a pet, oddly enough, was sure that this thing hadn't been a kangaroo though. Till this day, no one has ever figured out what was lurking in the woods around Enfield, Illinois. The Michigan Dogman is a creature that's been part of local legend since 1887, when it was first reported in Wexford County, Michigan, described as this 7-foot creature standing on its hind legs, but with the torso of a man and the head of a dog. It's also said to have glowing blue or amber eyes and lets out this terrifying howl that sounds like an eerily distorted human scream. While it wasn't widely known until later, the Dogman is said to have been haunting areas around the Manistee River long before the first reports came out. The first big encounter, though, was in 1887, when two lumberjacks claimed to have spotted a creature with the body of a man and the head of a dog. And over the years, there have been other sightings, including one in 1937 in Paris, Michigan, where a man was attacked by wild dogs, one of which was walking on two legs. There were more reports in the 50s and 60s, and in the early 90s, a man simply known as Ben to the press reported seeing the Dogman multiple times in Ottawa County. One time he saw it standing behind a car in his parents' driveway. Another witness, in 1994, hit a very large animal with his car, thinking it was a bear, but found gray fur left behind in the grill.
This one sounds completely made up, but has a cult following. In the 1970s and 80s, a decommissioned Air Force base at Montauk, Camp Hero, was rumored to host ultra-secret experiments. In 1992, book Montauk Project Experiments in Time claimed that Montauk became ground zero for bizarre research, from mind control and psychic spying to time travel and dimensional portals. According to the story, scientists built a giant radar tower and tunnel system under Camp Hero. Conspiracy believers talk about thousands of people being taken and turned into these mutant super soldiers controlled by the program. The authors claimed they themselves recovered memories of being experimented on there. There's zero official proof that this ever happened, and the book is widely considered fiction, but the legend still persists. To many, this is a glitch in history, a sensational mix of truth and tall tales that links secret Cold War tech with ideas ripped from a comic book. Whether real or not, the Montauk Project conspiracy adds a very strange chapter to our reality's more unbelievable stories. Imagine a thunderstorm. Suddenly, a fiery ball about the size of a basketball floats into the room through the window and then zaps out of existence. Sounds impossible, and that's exactly what numerous eyewitnesses claim happens with ball lightning. Across history, people report glowing spheres darting through air storms, lasting a few seconds and then vanishing or exploding. Scientists have taken these reports seriously. In fact, a recent review notes that thousands of eyewitness accounts exist, but no one has a solid theory for ball lightning. Instruments rarely capture it since it's unpredictable, so most evidence is anecdotal. The lack of consensus means ball lightning remains a genuine unsolved mystery in atmospheric physics. In other words, nature itself can occasionally glitch, creating luminous orbs that defy explanation and leave observers scratching their heads. Here's a glitch from the world of radio. Imagine you hit the button on your ham radio and call out, "Hello." Then 10 seconds later, you come back on the radio answering yourself. That is the bizarre, long-delayed echo phenomenon. First recorded in 1927 by Norwegian hobbyist Jørgen Hals, he heard a faint echo of a Dutch radio station's signal about 3 seconds after the original transmission. To this day, occasionally a strong radio pulse will return with a multi-second delay, far longer than normal skywave bounces, which take fractions of a second. Scientists have proposed everything from Earth's magnetosphere reflections to bouncing off spacecraft, but there is no consensus explanation. It's a genuine time warp effect in real life. You speak into the ether and then hear an answer way later, as if reality itself slowed down the signal. Late at night, you tune your shortwave radio and suddenly a monotone voice starts reciting random numbers. 7, 3, 4, over and over again. No music, no announcer, just mysterious numbers. These are numbers stations, and they date back to at least World War I. To most of us, they sound spooky and inexplicable, but they are real. Espionage experts believe these stations broadcast coded messages to spies in the field. The sequences of numbers are prearranged codes. Only the intended listener with a matching key can decode them. The stations often have catchy nicknames, and they pop up at scheduled times or seemingly sometimes at random. Despite being understood as spy tools, they feel mysterious, strangers on the airwaves shouting numbers with no explanation. Amateur sleuths still hunt for new stations and try to crack their codes, number stations are a real-life oddity, a ghostly radio background of human history that feels as if reality is speaking in cipher. The harsh Ural Mountains of 1959 saw one of history's most gruesome mysteries. A group of 9 experienced Russian hikers set up camp on the slope of a mountain pass now named Dyatlov Pass, but something terrifying happened that night. Searchers later found the tent slashed open from the inside, and the hikers' belongings were left behind. The bodies were scattered around. 2 were found half-dressed near a fire as if they fled the tent in panic. Some of the deceased had bizarre injuries. 1 had a fractured skull, another a twisted neck. 2 were missing their eyes, and 1 woman had no tongue. The Soviet investigators could only rule it as an unknown compelling force that had taken their lives. Decades later, explanations range from avalanches to military tests to Yeti attacks, but none fits all the facts. In short, this remains an unsolved glitch in history. People found dead under inexplicable conditions with no clear culprit. I know depending on who you ask, some say that this case is solved, but the Dyatlov Pass incident still haunts researchers because reality refuses to make sense of what happened that night. Imagine a World War II destroyer disappearing into a green fog. Literally vanishing. That's the claim of the legendary Philadelphia experiment. According to lore, in October 1943, the USS Eldridge was outfitted with secret equipment that rendered it invisible and even teleported it 200 miles away. Witnesses allegedly saw a green mist, and when the ship reappeared, crewmen were inexplicably fused to the metal or driven insane. The US Navy, however, has debunked this story. Official archives say no such teleportation experiment ever occurred, and that Eldridge was never even in Philadelphia at the time. Still, the tale persists as a mind-bending glitch, a mix of rumor, a novel, and possibly misinterpreted World War II tests. Picture walking on a beach and stumbling over a rotten, strange beast, a fur-covered blob with sharp teeth and no eyes. That is exactly what happened at Montauk, New York in 2008. A hunter found a decaying carcass washed ashore and snapped photos of this Montauk monster, sparking wild speculation. News reports said the creature looked otherworldly. Some claimed it was a secret lab animal from Plum Island, or even a leftover of a notorious Montauk Project experiments. More on that later. Experts eventually suggested it was probably a bloated raccoon carcass, but the mystery caught fire online. For days, people debated whether this was science, conspiracy, or a plain animal that nobody could recognize. It was Christmas 1980 in Suffolk, England, and US Air Force personnel at 2 bases saw something straight out of science fiction. Late on December 26th, witnesses reported strange lights flashing above Rendlesham Forest. Men with radar even tracked an object disappear behind the trees. A patrol sent in found a triangular craft with glowing lights and 3 landing legs. When soldiers approached, the craft vanished and some men lost consciousness for a few minutes during the encounter. The next night, the deputy base commander led a larger search party. They measured abnormally high radiation at the strange landing site, and multiple groups watched colored beams, a dome-shaped object, and figures moving inside it. To this day, the UFO landing remains one of the most credible military encounters on record. Even a US senator secretly investigated and hinted it was linked to other unexplained UFO events. Whether you believe in aliens or not, the Rendlesham Forest incident is a documented reality bend that has never been fully explained. Deep in a Norwegian valley, something glowing and inexplicable has been appearing since the 1980s. Residents of Hessdalen started seeing mysterious lights in the sky, glowing orbs hovering over the valley floor, darting through the woods, and even following vehicles. Hundreds of these lights were logged, At the peak, up to 20 per week would pop up above Hessdalen. Scientists got involved, of course. In 1983, they launched Project Hessdalen to record and study the phenomenon. In 1 month of fieldwork, they documented 53 occurrences. The lights are typically white or yellow, sometimes pulsating or moving in odd ways. Even today, local cameras capture about 20 sightings a year. No one has nailed down a definitive cause, and theories range from unusual atmospheric plasma to car headlights on distant roads. Okay, this one is terrifyingly real. The US government did conduct mind control experiments on unwitting people. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA ran a secret program called MKUltra to explore chemical interrogation and behavior control. Under MKUltra, agents dosed hospital patients, prisoners, and even unsuspecting civilians with certain illicit substances. They tried hypnosis, electroshock, and sensory deprivation. Anything to manipulate the human mind. Most records of MKUltra were ordered destroyed, but enough evidence leaked out. We know that it happened. Government reviewers have confirmed MKUltra was active in the 1950s and that many original documents were purposely shredded by top CIA officials. The full extent of the experiments is still unknown, and in casual terms, the CIA really did try to make people hallucinate and break them mentally, a shocking glitch in reality where trusted institutions harmed real human beings. Late at night near Marfa, Texas, locals and tourists have reported seeing balls of light dancing just above the desert floor. Called the Marfa lights, these glowing orbs, often the size of basketballs and colored white, blue, yellow, or red, appear completely out of nowhere. Witnesses say the lights can merge together, split apart, hover in the air, or zip off into the distance. What makes it creepier is that they only show up about a dozen nights a year, with no pattern in sight. The first known sighting was in 1883, and the legends grew from ghosts of Spanish explorers to secret alien bases. Scientists have weighed in with more down-to-earth ideas, maybe heated air layers bending distant car headlights, a mirage called a fata morgana, or swirls of methane gas igniting. Some physics students even filmed headlights and got similar glows. Yet even with these theories, no one can completely explain why the lights behave so oddly. There are nights when folks line up with cameras and see nothing, only for the sky to erupt in orbs the next. Scientists still admit nobody knows for sure what they are. The Marfa lights remain a true frontier of mystery, a shimmering glitch on the highway to the underworld. We think of the moon as dead and lifeless sometimes, but one mystery suggests it still holds secrets. Spacecraft orbiting the moon have detected strong, localized magnetic fields locked in some lunar rocks, especially on the far side. That's weird because today the moon has no global magnetic field or active core like Earth does. Some magnetism was expected from billions of years ago when the moon was molten inside, but the amounts on the far side just don't add up. Why are certain patches of lunar soil so strongly magnetized? A team from MIT recently suggested that a gigantic asteroid impact billions of years ago might have blasted the moon with a cloud of plasma and shock waves, magnetizing rocks across the globe. Their computer models show this could explain some of the anomalies on the far side, but even with that theory, the moon's magnetic map has, quote, large parts still unexplained. In other words, nobody has the complete answer yet. The moon seems to be playing a cosmic shell game with magnetism, leaving geologists scratching their heads. It's not a glitch you'd see with your eyes, but a hidden quirk in the moon's memory. And until we bring back more samples, the full story is still up in the air. In March 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 vanished with 239 people on board. That part is very well known. But what's lesser known is an alternative theory involving the US military base on Diego Garcia, an extremely remote island in the Indian Ocean. Some data suggested the flight veered off course and flew for hours before vanishing a second time, this time near where Diego Garcia is located. Adding to the mystery, multiple people, including a US-based tech worker named Philip Wood, allegedly sent messages from their phones after the disappearance. Wood's supposed message, posted online days later claimed he was being held on Diego Garcia and included metadata that some claimed pointed to the island. While many dismissed this as a hoax, others were stunned by the implications. There's no confirmed explanation, and the US has never acknowledged anything unusual, but here's the glitch. How did a commercial flight vanish from modern radar, ping satellites for hours, and possibly transmit data from a military zone? Whether the metadata was faked or not, the story stirred paranoia worldwide. It feels like a window into a shadowy corner of our world where time, truth, and tracking technology all failed at once. In the 1970s, a man named Derek Smith was walking near the abandoned RAF Montrose airfield in Scotland when he said he witnessed something out of time. He reported seeing a vintage aircraft, a World War I biplane, approach the field and begin to land. As the plane touched down, the vision faded. The sight was so vivid that Smith later researched the airfield's history and discovered that a pilot named Lieutenant Desmond Arthur had died in a biplane crash there in 1913. What makes this story more chilling is that it wasn't an isolated incident. Over the years, other visitors to RAF Montrose have described similar sightings: a ghostly plane circling, phantom engines humming, and even full apparitions of early 20th century airmen walking the field. Some theories suggest a quote time slip, a localized distortion where moments from the past replay in our present. Unlike typical ghost stories, these sightings were investigated by historians and even Air Force personnel who confirmed the area's long-standing reputation. The Royal Air Force eventually fenced off parts of the site, whether it was trauma imprinted on the land or something stranger. RAF Montrose became a real-world glitch where time didn't play by the rules. In the 1970s, a classified UK military experiment known as Project Hess allegedly documented multiple cases of soldiers vanishing for several minutes at a time from sealed, secure rooms. The men would reappear exactly where they vanished with no recollection of what happened, only confusion and nausea. Internal memos, declassified decades later, described the disappearances as, quote, brief temporal dislocations and caution about exposure to certain radio frequencies. No official explanation was ever made public, and the files were quietly buried again in the early 2000s. During early high-energy collisions at CERN's Large Hadron Collider, atomic clocks monitoring the site began to show minuscule but measurable discrepancies. Scientists noted in some tests clocks located near the collider would shift by fractions of a microsecond compared to those further away. This should not happen. Time dilation on that scale requires massive gravity or velocity. Some speculated that these could be miniature time slips caused by high-energy distortions, possibly even evidence of quantum-level glitches. CERN never formally claimed a malfunction of reality, but they did recalibrate every monitoring system afterward. In 2013, users on Reddit and Google Earth forums began reporting something strange. A small German town appeared as usual on Google Earth one day, then disappeared completely the next. Zooming in showed empty green space where buildings had been. Coordinates still worked, but all satellite imagery was gone. Then, 24 hours later, the town reappeared fully intact. Google never addressed the glitch, and there's no public record of map maintenance that day, so was it a software bug, or did reality briefly blink? During a solar eclipse in Zambia in 2022, astronomers and amateur photographers captured something they couldn't explain: a black dot hovering over the center of the sun for exactly 2.3 seconds. Not part of the moon, not a sunspot, just a void. Photos confirmed it, but live video feeds from the same locations showed nothing. Satellite logs from ESA and NASA recorded a momentary dip in light data as if something absorbed the sun's radiation completely. Some dubbed it a data void, others wonder if we briefly saw something not meant for us to see. In 2007, Lost Lake in Oregon mysteriously vanished. It happens actually every few years. The entire lake drains within 48 hours. But where does the water go? Geologists discovered a large hole at the bottom believed to be a lava tube from past volcanic activity, but even with that explanation, something just doesn't really add up. GPS mapping shows the volume of water disappearing is far greater than what a lava tube could handle, and it never floods nearby. It just vanishes. Scientists admit they have no complete model for what is going on here. In 1908, something exploded over the Siberian wilderness so violently that it flattened 800 square miles of forest, an area larger than the entire city of London. The shockwave knocked people off their feet hundreds of miles away, but when investigators arrived, they found nothing. No crater, no meteorite, just trees snapped in a radial pattern, some burned from the inside out. To this day, scientists still don't know what caused it. Was it a comet, a black hole, a pocket of antimatter? Whatever it was, it left behind one of the most powerful and unexplained events in Earth's history.
So I mentioned glitches in the Matrix a bit earlier, so I want to go into more detail on that. This one is very popular online. Glitches in the Matrix are when people claim to experience weird moments where reality seems to glitch out. Like say you notice what looks to be the same person walking by twice in a row, or objects appearing or disappearing out of nowhere, just weird stuff like that. Almost like a video game that's failing to render things correctly. The idea here is that we could be living in a simulation, and every so often, the code that runs the simulation gets a little wonky. But to take it a step further, what if those glitches aren't just errors in a simulation, but signs that our universe is brushing up against another one? In theory, if parallel universes do exist, we could occasionally get a peek into them or experience moments where the fabric of space-time bends. Could be as simple as noticing a repeating pattern in your day, but your brain can't quite reconcile with what you know of reality. It's like your system glitches out because it's trying to process something from another universe that doesn't quite match up with your version. The experience of missing time. This one is a classic, especially when it comes to UFOs. There are tons of stories and cases of people driving around a desolate road late at night when they see a strange light in the sky, and then all of a sudden, hours, or sometimes even days have passed that they just have no recollection of. Missing time. Could this phenomenon be connected to parallel universes? Well, the theory is that these abductees may have actually slipped into another timeline. As for whether aliens are involved or not, who knows? Point is, something could shift in the fabric of space-time and your consciousness jumps into a new version of reality, leaving this gap in your memories. It's not so much that time was stolen from you, it's more like you temporarily just moved into another timeline, and when you returned to your own, it felt like you lost those hours. Quantum tunneling is a very bizarre phenomenon where particles can move through barriers that should, according to physics, be impossible. Picture it like a ball traveling through a solid wall instead of bouncing off it. Yes, this does happen, but the science is very hard to explain. Again though, parallel universes, could they play into this? Could particles be tunneling from one reality to another? Instead of just interacting with the particles in our universe, these particles might slip through some sort of portal into another reality. This could help explain some of the bizarre stuff we see in our world that doesn't really make sense. Random moments where the laws of physics seem to just not apply. When it comes to parallel universes, the rules we know might not work the same way, and particles that can tunnel through different dimensions, well, that could be the key to how those universes are crossing paths, even if we don't always notice. Alright, let's switch gears, head up into space. We've got all kinds of mysterious things out there. Strange lights, unexplained radio signals, objects that don't behave how we expect them to. Of course, you know where I'm going with this one, but even some scientists wonder if some of these things could be evidence of parallel universes. Take the WOW signal, for example, an unexplained radio signal detected by astronomers back in 1977 that lasted for about 72 seconds and then disappeared. No one knows where it came from or what caused it. Some think it could have come from a parallel universe, trying to communicate with ours. And yes, it sounds pretty far-fetched, and maybe it is. Maybe there's a much more mundane explanation, but also consider just how vast and mysterious space is, and how little we really understand of it. Looking at it that way, the possibility of another universe interacting with ours in some way seems pretty plausible. Every so often we hear about things that seem to appear out of nowhere. Like maybe you're in your living room, you find a book on your coffee table that you're pretty sure you didn't buy, or maybe you swear you put your keys in one place but you find them sitting in a completely different spot and no one moved them. Or the reverse, objects just disappear without a trace. Can most situations like this be chalked up to our brains just sucking at remembering things sometimes? Sure, but could there also be something else going on in very rare cases? One theory is that this could be the result of objects slipping in and out of parallel universes. Say you leave your socks sitting on the edge of your bed, but when you turn around to grab them, they're nowhere to be found. So you look all over your room only to find that they're actually sitting on your bathroom counter. What if they were simply sucked into another version of reality for a while? Maybe it was in a parallel universe for a second, but when the reality shift happens, it comes back, just not in the same place you left them. Mandela effect, a phenomenon where a large group of people remember something in a certain way only to find out that it never actually happened that way at all. I think what's so interesting about this one is that unlike stuff like deja vu or objects going missing, situations that are a lot more likely to happen in isolation, Mandela effects are corroborated by mass amounts of people. For some context, the name Mandela effect comes from people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s, when in fact he passed away in 2013. Some people think this is a glitch in our collective memory. Like we've all tapped into a parallel universe where things happen just slightly differently. The list of famous Mandela effects is huge and just continues to grow. From the famous Bernstein Bears versus Bernstein Bears confusion to the misremembered lines from famous movies like Star Wars and Forrest Gump. It's almost like there is a version of reality that some people are still hanging on to, still remembering, even though it never actually existed in our timeline. Again, are these just examples of our collective memory not being the most reliable, or could we just possibly be momentarily connecting to another universe where things unfolded just slightly different? So let's start things off with ghosts. You probably didn't think I'd be starting off like this, but I think you could make a pretty good argument for paranormal stuff like this being a sign of possible parallel universe. Almost all of us have heard someone's first-hand account of having seen something, or feeling cold spots, hearing noises that don't seem to have a logical explanation. The usual explanation, aside from the ones made by skeptics, is that these are signs of hauntings, usually a dead person who's not able to fully cross over to the other side, so they remain in this limbo between the world of the living and the dead, tied to the places they once called home. But what if these so-called ghosts aren't actually spirits or souls, but glimpses into another universe? What if what we interpret as paranormal activity could be caused by parallel universes overlapping? Imagine it like looking through a frosted window. You can see movement on the other side, shadows and shapes, but they're not really there in the way we understand it. Maybe at times in certain places, the line between dimensions gets a little fuzzy, and you catch a brief glance into a parallel world. Instead of a ghost haunting you, maybe it's just a glimpse of someone from a different version of reality. Next, we've got time slips. Ever had a moment where you're sure you were somewhere, but everyone else insists you weren't, or vice versa? Now, if this happens to you a lot, definitely see a doctor before chalking it up to what some idiot online like me says, but if you've been cleared of any early signs of dementia, then maybe something stranger could be going on. Some people think these experiences could be linked to parallel universes, the idea being that we can sometimes slip between timelines. One minute you could be at a party, the next you're back home, but with no memory of how you got there. Or you might be walking down a street and suddenly the surroundings look completely different, like you've been dropped into a past version of your city. This sounds pretty ridiculous, and I can't say that I've ever experienced anything like this, but some people say they have. You can find stories like this all over places like Reddit. Not that you should believe everything you read online, but even if a small handful of these stories happen to be true, that is pretty strange. Some people think time slips could happen when two timelines briefly overlap, and your consciousness gets caught in this switch. You're still you, but somehow you're seeing a different version of events, like a time traveler who doesn't even know that they're time traveling. Now let's talk about something a bit more sciencey, quantum entanglement. This is a phenomenon where two particles become linked in such a way that when something happens to one, the other is instantly affected, no matter how far apart they are. Yes, this really does happen, despite the fact that what I just described doesn't seem to follow the rules of space and time. It's as if the particles are somehow aware of each other across these vast distances. We still don't know exactly why this happens, and if you wanted to make the argument, which I am, it could possibly point to, at the very least, a glitch in the matrix, similar to the parallel universes theory. A glitch in the matrix meaning that the world around us is an illusion created by who knows what. Point is, our universe may just be one of many. Could we exist in this complex web of overlapping universes where every now and then one of the strands twitches in a way we don't understand, causing a mysterious and unexplainable phenomena like this? Alright, let's talk deja vu. Sure, this gets talked about a lot, but for good reason. It's pretty disconcerting. Every time it happens, it throws me off. I'm always left with this uneasy, existential dread for about 30 seconds before I get on with my day, but it's this brief reminder that despite everything science tells us, and as clear as the world seems at face value, there are a lot of things we just don't understand. It's eerie, but kind of humbling. How can we be experiencing a sequence of events so specific that we logically know that it's the first time we've lived it, and yet somehow there's this feeling in the pit of our stomach that, no, we've been here before, seen this play out. It's not a memory, more like something you've seen in a dream, maybe? It's vivid yet hazy at the same time. There are tons of theories on deja vu. One being that you have lived the exact moment, but in a different life. That time either runs in a constant loop, or a parallel universe running right along our own briefly overlaps and gives us that strange, uncanny feeling. Think of it like your brain momentarily accessing memories from a different version of yourself, one who's living a slightly different life, but maybe in this other version you did something exactly like what you're doing right now, and for a split second your brain glitches and pulls that memory into the current moment. You're living in the present moment, but your mind receives a kind of signal from a different timeline. Notice anything strange about this next clip? Yeah, where the hell did that dog come from? So this video comes out of Chile, was posted to YouTube back in 2015. What I like about this one is that there's a very good reason for someone to be filming the road. There's a street race happening. Sometimes I watch, supposed real ghost or cryptid footage, and I'm like, alright, but why did they have their camera out in the first place? Anyway, this one looks pretty convincing to me, but what do you all think? Let us know down in the comments. This is the last known footage of a man named Stephen Kocher. Back in 2009, Stephen was living in Salt Lake City, Utah. He'd quit his job and moved down south to St. George, hoping to start fresh, but things weren't exactly going great. He couldn't find steady work, money was tight, and life was just kinda stuck in neutral. Then out of nowhere on December 12th, he up and left town. The next day, Stephen calls a couple of his friends and tells them he's in Las Vegas, but he doesn't say why he's there or what he's doing. That's the last time anyone ever heard from him. A few days later, police find his car parked in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Henderson, Nevada. Nothing's been stolen, nothing really seems off. He even left wrapped Christmas presents in the back seat for his family. A doorbell camera from a house in the neighborhood caught Stephen on the day he disappeared. You see him park his car, calmly cross the street, walk down the sidewalk, and then just walk out of frame. And that's it. That's the last confirmed sighting of him. No one knows why he was in that neighborhood. It's not a rough area. It's not near anything he was known to be involved with, and he didn't know anyone who lived there. His phone was pinging towers for a couple days after that, but then it just went dark. Some people think he might have faked his own disappearance, like maybe he was just overwhelmed with everything. He was broke, wanted to start over, but it's been over a decade now, and there's never been a single clue about where he went. If you heard a voice calling to you from another room, only it sounded just like you, what would you do? This clip was posted to TikTok by Andy Winehouse, and I don't even care if this is staged, it just gives me the goosebumps. Just the idea of hearing your own voice calling to you from the next room, it sends a shiver up my spine. The uploader also wrote in the comments, "For extra clarification, I thought it was the TV or my wife watching one of my TikToks at first. I called her immediately when I realized it wasn't her in the other room. I waited about 3 minutes and the voice stopped, but footsteps continued for about 12 more minutes. In Plattsmouth, Nebraska, there's a place called the Museum of Shadows. A lot of creepy things are said to go on here, but this video actually showed up on Fox News. So in the early morning hours of February 2nd, 2018, museum owner Nate Ratterman checked the cameras and spotted something straight out of a ghost movie. Inside one of the museum rooms, a small ball, what paranormal folks call a trigger object, starts moving. Of course, there was no one else in the room at the time. The ball doesn't just do a lame little, roll either. It lifts off the ground like it's being picked up by some unseen hand, and then it gets chucked across the room. You'll notice at one point it's sitting on the floor and then bounces into the air. It's not being thrown from off camera or something. The museum sits in a building from 1881 that used to be a saloon, with a brothel upstairs where a number of people reportedly died. This next video comes out of a hospital in Mexico. Here we see a doctor being filmed with what has to be a mid-2000s flip phone. Just gotta love that early YouTube 240p quality. Suddenly though, something weird happens in the background. Watch the double doors behind the doctor. You can clearly see a dark figure pass by. It's not a light trick, it's not a camera glitch. Something clearly moves behind those doors. Well, alright, so no big deal. It's doors leading to a room someone just walked by. Well, the camera operator reacts. Clearly wasn't expecting anyone to be back there. So he walks over and opens the door to check things out. And inside we see, well, nothing. At least no living person. It's just this empty room with medical equipment, and one piece of gear is slowly rolling, like something just brushed past it. And if you look closely back at the shadowy figure and how it moves past the door again, it almost looks like it doesn't walk, it kinda glides. You don't get that up and down motion when a normal person walks, it's just fast and silent. Reddit user Baroness von Schrader posted a couple of photographs taken at their aunt's wedding in 1966, and one of them looks very off. The first picture is normal, just a happy bride and groom. The second picture looks normal at first glance, but look at it for more than a couple seconds, and there's clearly something off about this image. Just what is that ghostly looking figure in between them? Clearly the uploader didn't know who it was, because they took the time to post these images. Well, the Redditor also attached one more image, a photo of their aunt's grandmother, who'd been dead long before the wedding photos were taken. What do you all think? Did the bride's long dead grandmother make a visit from beyond the grave? This final clip comes from Reddit user Stuart James Author, who'd been carrying out a paranormal investigation at Oxford Castle. He hadn't noticed anything odd while filming, but when he reviewed the footage later, he noticed a couple very unsettling things. First, while passing by a window, he spotted what really looks a lot like a ghostly face peering in at him. Take a look. So, did you spot that? Here it is zoomed in. This next one is kinda hard to make out, but as he turned a corner leading into a dark hallway, he spotted what looked like a humanoid figure leaning up against a wall. He said he hadn't seen it when he was filming initially. This first video showed up on a news segment in the Philippines back in 2003. So a basketball coach was filming one of his training sessions, just a normal day with the kids out on the court. Everything seemed fine, it was sunny, no drama, but when he got home and started reviewing the footage, he spotted something weird. In the background, across the street, a kid suddenly runs by. Now, why would this catch his attention? Well, the coach didn't recognize the kid at all. In fact, he didn't even see him there while he was filming that day. It was like the boy had just materialized into the video. He rewound the clip again and was totally creeped out. Alright, maybe he was just freaking himself out. Maybe the kids had seen this mysterious kid. Well, he had all his basketball kids watch the video too, and they all freaked out. None of them had seen the mystery kid either. And on top of that, they started telling him about how they'd had this strange feeling that day. Some of them even mentioned feeling cold chills during the practice, which made no sense because it was hot out. It was summer, it's the Philippines. Wanting answers, the coach had the video checked by a professional editor. After examining the footage, the expert confirmed the mystery figure was definitely there. There were no signs of tampering and no digital tricks. What you're looking at here is security footage captured inside a church in Texas. The identity of this person is still unknown. On April 18th, 2016, 45-year-old fitness instructor Missy Bevers was found dead inside the Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian, Texas. She'd gone in early, around 4 a.m. to set up for one of her boot camp classes. By 5 a.m., a student arrived and found her body. She'd suffered multiple puncture wounds to the head and chest, and a hammer was also found nearby. Surveillance footage from inside the church, taken shortly before the attack, showed a figure dressed in full SWAT-style tactical gear, a black helmet, a vest marked police gloves, slowly walking through the building. The person is seen opening doors and just casually smashing windows. They had a noticeable limp or some kind of awkward gait, possibly dragging one leg at times. Police still haven't even identified though if the suspect is male or female. Strangely, nothing was stolen either. Missy's iPad and personal belongings were left untouched. The church's exterior cameras weren't working that day, and investigators never released footage showing the actual encounter. It's believed that the killer waited inside and ambushed her. The 2010 to 2012 Nissan Altima was caught on a nearby store security cam circling the parking lot around 2 a.m., flashing headlights and acting suspiciously. That driver was never identified. Missy had also been receiving strange LinkedIn messages from a man before her death. We don't know if that's connected or not. To this day, even with all this footage, no one knows who killed her or why. This eerie footage was posted to YouTube by Chad Logan back in 2012, and it's been a complete mystery ever since. It's just 5 minutes of this creepy 8mm footage. Most of the video is pretty innocuous until it gets to the woods. Here we see the camera person following this old woman into the woods before we're eventually led to a cloth sack on the ground. The camera person gets up close to the bag and opens it, revealing what looks to be human hair, and then a full human head. There's only one other video on this person's channel called Bitterroot Photos. Here we see Chad holding up a series of old black and white photos which supposedly came with the reel of film that he received. For context, he was a student at a university in New York. He just moved into a studio apartment and needed some furniture. Found a guy on Craigslist that wanted to desperately get rid of his things at super cheap prices. He sold things in bulk to get rid of as much as possible. Chad bought a small table, and with it came a bunch of other random things, one being this old wooden box. He had to force open the lid with a screwdriver, and inside he found these old pictures. The word Bitterroot was handwritten on the backs of all of them. There was also a tin can that contained a reel of 8mm film. To this day, we've never gotten any updates. So this creepy footage was caught on a home security camera in Mexico just a few days before Halloween. Perfect. The homeowner had heard weird noises coming from his garage, so he went to check on his dogs. Well, the dogs weren't making the noises. They were totally quiet actually, not barking, they weren't growling or anything. He walks into the garage and we see this freaky figure crouched behind one of the cars. At first, it's on all fours, almost like an animal, but then it stands up and things just get weirder from there. One of the dogs finally reacts to this and you can see this thing like stretching, like its arms and legs are almost growing. It's just lurking there half hidden, and the whole shape, it just looks wrong, like it's shifting or something. The guy gets closer, the thing crouches down again, and he just nopes out of there to go alert his wife. By the time they come back though, the thing's vanished out of view. So what in the hell was that thing? Well, it turns out there may be a specific name for it. Some folks think it might have been a Nahual, a shapeshifter from Mesoamerican folklore that can take the form of animals. Alright, well this one sent a weird little spasm up my spine. Just watch this. The more I watch it, the more I want to retch. What in the hell is in there? I thought it was some dirty water dripping out, more like dirty goo, because it's just hanging out of the tap. That would be bad enough to find as is, but for it to just suck itself back in like that. What kind of weird David Cronenberg horror? Seriously though, what is in there? It's not a spider, the movement is just too, I don't really know how to describe it, wiggly I guess. Spider would just like go right back in, but this thing, you do kind of see it dangle a little bit as it moves. I don't know, it just doesn't look like something that should be alive. Goo shouldn't recoil when gently brushed up against with a tissue. Anyway, enjoy brushing your teeth after watching this. Do you ever get creeped out when your pets react to things that you can't see or hear? We've all been there. Your cat suddenly freezes in place and just stares at an empty corner of your room. Your dog starts barking at the closet, only there's nothing in there. Well, according to Reddit user Derp Peepo, they posted this clip saying that their dog does this periodically. If you listen, there are some pretty obvious footsteps audible over his growling, they write. The steps were not audible out loud, only over playback. I always wonder what's going on, when cats and dogs do stuff like this. I mean, clearly something is freaking this dog out, but what? Dog senses are a lot more developed than ours. They hear, smell, and see way better than we can, which is why there's always been this eerie idea that maybe they're more sensitive to paranormal activity as well. Don't you just love climbing up into your attic to see what's making all the eerie noises at night? A Redditor by the name of Icy Maintenance 7511 had just moved into this tiny wooden house way up in a remote village in northern Italy. After living in the city forever, they were really excited to finally have found a place that was quiet and peaceful, but it didn't stay peaceful and quiet for long. At first, the house seemed cozy, but after a few weeks, weird stuff started happening. Mainly, they'd hear strange noises coming from the attic late at night, random thumps and creaks and bumps, but also sounded like something being dragged across the floor up there. At first, they just brushed it off as the house settling, but the noises got louder. That's when the Redditor decided, you know what, I'm just gonna try and find out what the hell is going on. So they climbed up to the attic and recorded this. Now amazingly, the Reddit user did something that nobody ever thinks to do in a horror movie: just leave. Don't sleep there. Icy Maintenance 7511 said they were so scared they bolted out of the house and didn't even go back for their phone, which they left up there in the attic in a panic. They went back way later to grab it. Let me start by saying this video is scary enough without the spooky figure that shows up in the trees. It's just probably not the best idea to be driving a bike through a remote forest in the middle of the night. It's just dangerous. You likely don't need me to tell you that, but this person did it, so I know y'all are out there. So here we see this POV video of someone riding through the forest, again in the middle of the night. Everything is just a blur of trees flying past until the last few seconds. If you slow it down, you'll catch it. Standing off to the side, just barely visible between the trees, is this thing. It looks like a tall, faceless figure wearing a suit. These images went viral a few years back. Reddit user Love Is Evil Xanax uploaded a series of pictures back in 2020 that got a lot of people talking online. They gave some context for the images, writing, "My uncle has a trail cam at my old grandparents' house, who are both dead. The house is abandoned. The camera takes 3 pics every time a motion is detected. This thing only appears in 1 out of 3 of the photos. For more info, for anyone wondering, my uncle was up there and left. The trail cam caught him leaving in his car completely. The trail cam takes pictures so fast it looks like stop motion if looked through quickly. This thing walks up 6 minutes after he left. It's only in a few pics, and the time says the thing was only on screen for 1 second. And the next picture, it's just gone. Never walked out of frame, just went away." So this first video comes out of Ohio. It's police body cam footage taken during the arrest of a woman named Irene Bedard back in 2022, but it's recently been going viral. Now the name Irene Bedard may not be all that familiar to you, but Pocahontas probably is. She's the actress who did the voice, so kinda a big part of a lot of our childhoods. The video isn't gaining traction because of her legal problems though, but because of something that happens later in the video. So police were trying to calm Bedard down. They approached her as she was standing at the other end of a hallway, and that's when we hear her yell something unsettling. She says repeatedly, "I don't know what that is."
Bob! I don't know what that is.
So she's very clearly frightened by something. We just don't know what. And according to her words, she doesn't know either. She runs past the camera, and that's when something eerie shows up on the floor, some sort of black morphing shape. This video was posted just last month on Reddit. It was captured in Iraq. Clearly something is gliding across the sky. Now, is it a drone? Well, that's probably your first thought, right? But I don't know. It doesn't really look like one to me. I mean, it could be a drone of some kind, but is it some sort of experimental military one or something? The shape is just so strange. Some commenters said it gave off Metapod vibes. I can kind of see that. Others say it looks like that jellyfish UAP video taken back in 2018, and if you need a reminder there, well, this jellyfish-shaped thing had been flying over a US Joint Operations Base, also in Iraq, and the Pentagon officially classified this thing as an unknown aerial phenomenon. So that certainly adds a bit more mystery to this newer video, but in case you're still thinking that it's just a regular drone, well, it also looks similar to something spotted in this next video taken 2 decades earlier. So this strange clip was captured back in 2005 in Phoenix, Arizona. This one has a very strange shape as well. Doesn't look like your stereotypical flying saucer, but it is not a plane or a satellite either. I almost want to say kinda looks humanoid, like a dude flying around in a jetpack maybe? I don't know. It's too far away to really make out the details, but a commenter posted a link to this video as well, a UAP with a similar shape, but we can make out more odd details. This video was taken in Milan, Italy in 2012. Luckily, some people online have a lot of time on their hands, and a Redditor went in and took some screenshots of the thing and enhanced them. And wow, right? That certainly looks pretty alien. All the weird lights on it, but they're not like little lights. Flashing ones, they're more like just the color of the thing itself. Very bizarre looking. Moving on to some ghostly footage now. Usually ghost videos are pretty hard to make out, but this one is just so clear that I straight up thought it was just a person walking across a room, and I was like, what's supposed to be paranormal about this? Well, according to Chase the Bass, who uploaded the clip to TikTok, yeah, that's not him walking across the room. In fact, he has no idea who or what this is. And the more you watch the clip, the more you realize that there's something off about it. I know it's kind of low quality home security camera footage, but this figure doesn't really look fully solid, especially when compared to all the furniture surrounding it, and then it just completely vanishes once it's in the middle of the room. You'll notice the kitchen light flicks off as soon as it walks in, too. Pretty spooky stuff. What do you all think of this one? Is it staged? Was something up with the camera? Or could this be a genuine piece of paranormal footage? In the early 90s, a young man named Brian Collins claimed to have spotted 2 fairy-like beings. He'd been vacationing on the Aran Islands just off the coast of County Donegal, Ireland, and one morning while he was out for a walk, he came across 2 figures, no taller than 3.5 feet. They were fishing from a bank that overlooked the water. They were chatting and laughing in Irish Gaelic. As soon as the small creatures noticed Brian, though, they dashed off, jumping over the bank and disappearing from sight. Brian tried to follow them, but they were gone. He did find a small pipe one of them had left behind, though, and according to Brian, this pipe vanished from a locked drawer where he'd stashed it away. He was determined to spot the little men again, though, and this time he wanted evidence. He went back to the same spot the following day, armed with a camera and a tape recorder. Again, this was the early 90s. This time he took a photo and recorded their conversation. He raced back home to review what he'd recorded, but there was nothing on the recording other than the sound of water and a light breeze. He later looked at the picture he developed, and there was no sign of the little people there either. In August of 1862 in Brecon, Wales, David Evans and Evan Lewis were heading back from a timber haul when they decided to take a break near a farm. As they sat there relaxing, Evans suddenly spotted something on a hill nearby. It looked like a line of around 50 figures making their way up the slope. Once the figures reached the top of the hill, they started dancing in a large circle. Evans and Lewis just sat there watching as the figures danced closer and closer to the center of the circle, only to disappear into the ground one by one. Then they reappeared the same way, one after another, dancing another round before vanishing back into the hill, and this time they didn't come back out. Evans and Lewis later bumped into an old man on the side of the road, and they got to talking and ended up sharing their story with the man. The old guy wasn't sure what to make of what they told him, but he did mention that his own grandfather had told stories about fairies dancing in the area. In 1884, on the Isle of Man, a man named William Martin was vacationing when he came across a mail car driver who ended up telling him a very unusual story. According to the driver, one evening while collecting mail, he had a run-in with a group of small fairy-like creatures. They'd been dressed in bright red, each carrying a lantern. As the driver was making his way back, just 6 miles from his final stop, these mischievous fairies stopped the cart's horse, tossed all the mailbags onto the road, and then began dancing around them. The driver tried to get the bags back onto the cart, but every time he did, they just kept tossing them back out. This went on all night, and by the time he finally got the bags back on the cart and reached his destination, he was hours late and incredibly frustrated. That's a very bizarre version of the dog ate my homework. This next case was shared by a woman named Mrs. G. Herbert in a 1928 issue of the Transactions of the Devonshire Association. Back in 1897, when she was just a young girl, she had a strange encounter in Dartmoor, England. While out for a walk, she spotted a tiny man, around 18 inches tall, hiding under an overhanging boulder. He wore a pointed hat that curved slightly forward and was wearing what she described as little short knicker things. Before she could fully grasp what she was seeing, the little man vanished. Herbert rushed home to tell her mother, who of course didn't believe her. Then in 1925, a now 35-year-old Mrs. Herbert found herself on the moors of Dartmoor again. She was very familiar with the area now, but she suddenly, for some reason, found herself completely lost. And with no idea of which direction to take, she started to think that she was under the influence of troublesome fairy folk. So she turned her pockets inside out, an old charm said to help ward off fairy magic, and apparently this worked because suddenly everything around her was familiar again, and she was able to finally find her way back home. From Reddit user Kuro Oruk comes her first-hand account with fairies. She writes, "When I was about 20, I was staying at my boyfriend's mom's house one night. I was a little sleep deprived as we'd been out the night before. I decided to go upstairs for a nap and woke up some hours later to darkness. The full moon was shining through the window and suddenly there was rustling and movement everywhere in the room. As I tried to see what it was that was moving, I started to see tiny beings coming from all around the curtains and kind of bungeeing down the glass onto the floor. There were voices and they sounded excited. I sat up, terrified, and made a run for it downstairs. I remember being a little embarrassed to say what had happened to freak me out so much, but when I relayed my story to my boyfriend's mom, she just smiled and told me, "Oh, that's nothing to worry about. Every morning when I get up, I open the back door and I invite the fairies in." One intriguing account of fairy sightings comes from the early 20th century in Ireland. Most of these stories come out of Ireland, unsurprisingly. The story was recounted by an American anthropologist named Walter Evans Wentz. He'd been doing research into Irish fairy lore and ended up speaking to a 73-year-old man named Neil Colton, who claimed that he'd had a real encounter with fairies in 1853 when he was young. According to Neil Colton, he, his brother, and his cousin were gathering blueberries behind their family home when they started to hear music. To their astonishment, they discovered a group of 6 to 8 small people dancing in a circle just a few dozen yards away. Neil described how once he noticed them, a little woman dressed entirely in red rushed toward them. She struck Neil's cousin in the face with what seemed to be a small green plant. The 3 youngsters immediately fled back into the house, but Neil's cousin passed out shortly after they got inside. His father quickly called for Father Ryan, a local priest, who performed a blessing and struck the cousin with a stole, and miraculously she woke back up. A very strange and outlandish story, but prepare yourself, it doesn't get any less strange and outlandish from here on out. This one's fun because it's a fairly recent case, 2005, recent compared to 1853 anyway. In the summer of 2005 in Chicora, Pennsylvania, a man going simply as JF shared a story to the press about a very strange encounter. He and his girlfriend were hanging out with friends at a house surrounded by dense woods. After enjoying the sunset from the back deck, the group continued to relax and chat as the sun continued going down, and suddenly they heard a commotion coming from the potted plants near one of the last small patches of sun. Everyone turned to see what was causing the noise, and out of nowhere, a tiny figure shot up into the air. The creature was about 12 inches tall and had a human-like head with long, pointy ears. As it hovered in mid-air, wings unfurled from the thing's back, but they weren't the type of wings you typically think of when you picture a fairy. They were more like a bat's wings. After a few moments of hovering over the group, the being fluttered away like a butterfly, disappearing into the dark woods. The group was understandably completely awestruck, sitting frozen in silence for a bit before looking at each other and being like, did we just see a fairy? From Reddit user The Pie Wizard comes a story I'm going to call the Cloaked Figure. I was in Tomnahurich Hill Cemetery in Inverness, Scotland in 2018. I heard a woman's voice whisper my name in my left ear while I was alone at the top of the hill. Later, I found out from a local bartender that the hill is known as a fairy fortress. Exactly 1 week later, I was in England and had the only instance of sleep paralysis I've ever had. A shadow figure stepped out of a bright light at the foot of my bed. The best way I can describe it is that it looked like a dementor without the cloak. No facial features, maybe about 5 feet tall. The skin on it had texture, lines and such, and was dark gray and black in color. It sat down next to me and leaned in close to my left ear. I didn't hear anything, but was finally able to move at that point, and it got visibly startled and backed away into the darkness, not the same direction of the light. Needless to say, I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I felt uneasy for the remainder of my time in Europe, about a month. As soon as the plane took off, I felt a lot less heavy and haven't experienced anything like it since. In May of 1913 in Farmsville, Texas, 3 brothers, Clyde, Sid, and Silby Latham, were out in the fields chopping cotton. As they were working, their 2 dogs suddenly started going wild, barking uncontrollably, but there was no one there, at least not by the looks of it. The boys went to check out the commotion and were shocked to find what they described as a tiny green man standing just 18 inches tall. The little guy was dressed in what looked like a green rubber suit. Before they could fully process what they were looking at, the dogs attacked the tiny guy and sadly just ripped him to pieces. The brothers would head back to the scene the next day to verify what they'd seen and make sure they hadn't lost their minds, but when they returned, there was no sign of the green man's remains. Decades later, in 1978, Larry Sessions from the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History took an interest in the case and interviewed Silby. He was understandably pretty skeptical of this story, but Silby was adamant that everything he said was true and that he and his brothers had not in any way mistaken a large frog for an 18-inch man in a green suit. What the f*** am I talking about? It's like, wow. In 1948, a young boy named E.G.M. Reynolds from London was on summer holidays in Horseshoe. One night while setting rabbit traps, Reynolds had a bizarre encounter. Under the moonlight, he spotted a small, hairy figure coming out from a blackberry bush. Reynolds described it as a tiny man standing about 18 inches tall, once again, covered in hair with a bare face that had a leathery appearance and unusually long arms. It sounds like a monkey to me, but when Reynolds shared his experience with the people he was staying with, they just laughed him off. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, Reynolds saw the same hairy man again, this time in broad daylight and in a completely different spot. The little guy was just casually strolling across a lawn, and Reynolds decided he was just gonna keep quiet about this whole thing, this whole second sighting, until coming out with this story to the public when he was older. This one comes straight from the military, which makes it stand out from your usual eyewitness videos. In March of 2004, a Mexican Air Force surveillance plane was flying over the state of Campeche when its crew spotted something strange. Actually 11 strange things. Using infrared cameras, they recorded multiple glowing orbs in the sky, flying at around 11,500 feet. The lights weren't visible to the naked eye, but they showed up clear as day on the infrared footage. What made this sighting even more intriguing was how the objects moved. They didn't fly in a normal pattern like a commercial or military aircraft would. Some of them even appeared to circle the plane. The pilots were clearly unnerved. The footage was eventually handed over to the Mexican Defense Department and they decided to release it to the public. That almost never happens. Once the video was out, Jaime Maussan got involved, again calling it solid proof of extraterrestrial visitation. It became a big story in UFO circles around the world. But as always, skeptics weighed in. Their main theory was that the glowing orbs were just flares from offshore oil rigs showing up as heat signatures on the infrared cameras. Still, the pilots insisted that what they saw and recorded didn't behave like any flares they'd ever seen, and the fact that the military made the footage public gave it a lot more credibility than your typical blurry YouTube clip. No matter how you look at it, this is one of the most well-documented UFO cases out of Mexico. Carlos de los Santos was a young, experienced pilot flying back to Mexico City. The skies were clear, everything was normal, and he was cruising along when suddenly he saw something out of the corner of his eye on the right wing. A metallic saucer-like object. Before he had time to process it, another one showed up on the left wing. Then a third came barreling toward him head-on, barely missing the nose of his plane. And then something truly horrifying happened. His controls were unresponsive. He couldn't steer, he couldn't descend, it was like the plane was just flying itself. Carlos radioed in, told air traffic control that he'd lost command of the aircraft and was being followed by unknown objects. He thought he was done for. But then, just like that, the discs vanished and the controls kicked back in. He safely managed to land back in Mexico City, shaken but alive. Aviation authorities even checked the plane afterward. No mechanical failure. Way before UFO sightings were trending on the internet, or even before planes existed really, we had Jose Bonilla, a Mexican astronomer who'd been trying to study the sun when something odd happened. In 1883, while observing sunspots from the Zacatecas Observatory, Bonilla noticed something strange. There were hundreds of dark shapes moving across the sun. Fast moving, oddly shaped, and all heading in the same direction. So he did what any astronomer would do. He started taking photos. Bonilla managed to capture over 300 of these strange objects in front of the sun using the technology of the time, which was basically a big old camera strapped to a telescope. He published his findings in a scientific journal, describing them as some kind of flying bodies. But he didn't say aliens or anything like that, he just logged what he saw. Over time, people came up with all kinds of theories. Some said it was just birds, maybe geese flying at high altitudes. Others said maybe meteors or debris. But here's the thing. How many geese are flying in tight formation that high up at a speed fast enough to cross the sun that quickly and do it all 300 plus times? It seems weird. Plus, I feel like this guy would have known, he would have seen birds up there before. He was always looking at the sky. Today, some UFO researchers point to Bonilla's photos as possibly the first photographic evidence of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP. This one takes us back to 1997, peak VHS era, when a resident of the Las Lomas neighborhood in Mexico City filmed something bizarre floating in the sky. What you see is a metallic-looking disc-shaped object kind of wobbling around midair. Doesn't zoom off or flash lights, it just slowly drifts like it's cautiously observing. The camera operator is clearly shocked too. You can hear it in their voice. They're reacting in real time to something that genuinely doesn't look normal. Now, skeptics were quick to point out that the UFO looks like it could be suspended by a string, and yeah, the wobbliness doesn't help, but here's the thing, it's floating in open sky, far off in the distance. If this was some cheap hoax, it was weirdly well executed for the late 90s. Others think the wobble might actually be evidence for the thing being real. Maybe it was damaged, maybe it was malfunctioning. Whatever it was, it's still one of Mexico's more debated UFO clips. So this one's basically Mexico's version of Roswell. The story goes like this. On August 25th of 1974, a small civilian aircraft, a Cessna, disappeared near a town called Coyami, right along the US-Mexico border. Not long after, both Mexican and American military forces were spotted moving into the area. The reason? A supposed mid-air collision between that Cessna and something else. Something not from around here. According to different reports and whistleblower-style retellings, the Mexican military was first on the scene. They located 2 crash sites, one for the plane and one for the unknown object. Eerily, the recovery team that got to the UFO was later found dead, with no obvious injuries. The bodies were said to be removed by a convoy that mysteriously disappeared, possibly intercepted by American forces who crossed the border and took everything, including the craft. Of course, that's the wild version. The official story is that the Cessna was part of a smuggling operation and just simply went down, but some think there's just way too much smoke here for there not to be fire. Military convoys, radio silence, surveillance planes. Something weird happened out in the desert that night. And if the US did swoop in and grab the wreckage, well, it wouldn't be the first time. At number 1, we've got a UFO hotbed that's been capturing people's attention for decades. Popocatépetl, one of Mexico's most active volcanoes. It's a bit of an anomaly when it comes to UFO sightings. This towering mountain, standing at over 17,000 feet, sits in a seismic and volcanic zone, which has some thinking that maybe earthquakes and eruptions might attract UFOs. Maybe the atmosphere around the volcano creates these strange, unpredictable phenomena that seem out of place, and maybe aliens are just curious about what's happening down below. Either way, there's no shortage of sightings here. Witnesses have described seeing strange objects, sometimes appearing near the summit, and it's not just a couple of isolated reports. There are multiple photographs showing strange lights or craft in the area. And sure, some of these sightings might just be planes, drones, or natural stuff, but others remain totally unexplained. With all that said, I've been your host, Jane.